So welcome everyone to the Path of Awakening, Buddhist Path of Awakening course. Let's bow in. Wonderful to see everybody. Quick announcement. There will be no class next week. It's just have to do that. So we'll skip next week and then we'll resume the week after that. That's it. And you can stand by for emails and it'll inform you of that and some other things as well, but the reading for next week and so forth. So we're discussing the reading for this week, which is on the subject of discipline. The Sanskrit word for this is shila, and the Tibetan is tsultrim. And basically, discipline is one of the three main wheels of learning, and they're called meditation, study, and discipline. And what discipline really amounts to is that aspect of both meditation and study, which brings us back to this present moment. The basic problem that we have is that we're constantly lost in dreams. Dreams, and these dreams have a particular structure. They're very involved with I, who is the hero or heroine of these dreams, and a variety of others, all the others that I relates to. And the relationships are fraught and they're emotional. These are called klesha, these emotions, they're defilements. We have all kinds of emotions, but there are basically three fundamental relationships between I and other. And that is this, that if you see the I as being favorable to you, something that is going to augment your existence, make you happier, more secure, so forth, then you want to pull it to you. And this is termed passion or desire. The second option is that if you see the other as being dangerous, inimical, threatening, something that reduces your well-being, then you want to get it out of your life and you push it away. And that's called aggression. And the third option is that you see the other as being indifferent, that it's not for you or against you. And if that's the case, you don't really care and you are indifferent towards it. And that is variously translated, usually sort of wrongly, as ignorance. That term in Sanskrit, it's a very different word, or Tibetan, than the word for ignorance. The word is moha, which really means just indifference. You don't care about that other thing. So these are the three options that when in way I and other interact. And they're called in Buddhism the three poisons. They're the three core problems of confusion and suffering and ignorance. And they proliferate and they amount sort of, what's the word I want? They just combine and turn into other things. They're always combined with stories. You love this person because they have blue eyes. You hate that person because they insulted you. You are indifferent to this person because they just don't mean much to you. Whatever it might be, the story that we have. And we have these stories that combine with the energies of these three poisons. And then the energies begin to mix. And if you take a little dash of aggression, hatred towards somebody, and mix it with some desire, maybe you get envy or jealousy, and so forth. And you get all, by mixing these stories and these, they're sort of like, they're the paints, as it were, these emotions. You get the full range of emotion. In Buddhism, they say there are 5 or sometimes 6 primary emotions. The fundamental they are hatred or aggression, which is involved with fear. That's one. The second one would be a feeling of poverty, hunger, that you need something. The third is stupidity, of just sort of plowing along and eating whatever comes in front of your nose. And the fourth is passion, the sort of connoisseurship of life, looking for the next pleasure. And the fifth is jealousy or envy. And the sixth fundamental emotion is pride, arrogance, and sort of being happy and blissed out and not caring about anybody else. And these are called the 6 realms of existence. And the aggression is the hell realm. The feeling of poverty is called the realm of the hungry ghost. The stupidity is the animal realm, because animals have very limited range of response, and they live their lives, most animals, in fear. And passion is the realm of human beings. We're connoisseurs. We like this painting better than that one. We like this wine better than the other, whatever it may be. And then the jealous God realm is the realm of envy, and you want what other people have, and you become a warrior trying to storm the gates of the heaven that you would like to inhabit. And the God realm is the last one. It's the realm of pride and bliss, and that's when you have achieved heaven. And these are the different styles, the neurotic styles of ego, the sense of I, which arises and passes away in the moment. Whenever we come fully present, whenever we wake up from our daydreams and are really aware here, those realms are gone. And the I and other are gone as well. And meditation, really, at its core, is the act of continually realizing that one is dreaming and coming back from the dream. Just like in the morning, when you wake up and you realize that you've been having a dream and now you're not, until you start thinking about your day. And then you go off into that kind of a daydream instead of a night dream. So meditation has 2 forms. It actually has a number of others, but the core meditations that we do, which are called the path of wisdom in Buddhism, as opposed to when you get to Tantra, you'll have the path of means as well as the path of wisdom, and you will pursue both. But the path of wisdom is really divided into 2 practices, the practice of shamatha and of vipassana, or as it's called in the Pali tradition, vipassana. And shamatha is often called in English mindfulness practice, whereas vipassana, or vipassana in the Pali, in the Southeast Asian tradition, is called awareness practice. So we can do that. We can just refer to these, drop the Sanskrit for the moment, or the Tibetan for that matter, and simply refer to them as mindfulness and awareness practice. Mindfulness practice is the practice of coming back from dream. The way we do it is we usually use an object to bring us back. It's the breath. When we become aware of the breath, well, the breath only happens in the present moment. So every time you become aware of the breath, you have come back from dreams. But you can use other things too. You can use a mantra, a sound, and in fact, this is what's done in the Hindu tradition. The practice that is mainly taught in yoga studios, in yoga traditions altogether, transcendental meditation, is what a Buddhist would call shamatha, mindfulness practice. That we are coming back from dreams to something, some object of awareness in the present moment, again and again. shifting our loyalty from these dreams to this object of awareness in the present moment. Then the practice of awareness meditation is that having once come back to the present, we don't have to focus our minds on a single object like the breath or a mantra. I mean, you can't drive your car while you're watching your breath. It could be dangerous, right? So what we do is we can then, having come back from dream, we can open our awareness to everything that's going on. This space that we inhabit, this room, this time, which we call the present. And so we come back, and this is the process of really overcoming egotism, because ego only lives in those dreams, those stories that we tell ourselves. That person shouldn't have said this to me. I'm going to get even with them. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'm worried about paying my rent. What's going to happen if I can't pay my rent? And it's all about I. These dramas that always constellate around I and always involve one or more others, others. And so he starts out this chapter by talking about how the main point of discipline is to overcome this I-other problem. And the way we do it is through the practice of meditation, but also, and he doesn't go into this so much here, but what begins to happen is that one begins to realize that, in fact, I and other are, in fact, myths. They are mental creations that come and go, change all the time, instant by instant, hour by hour, year by year. I mean, we can barely remember what we were thinking 5 minutes ago, much less 5 days ago. What kind of thoughts we were having as we walked down the street. Maybe you can, if it was a really bad one or a really good one. And it'll be just like a little highlight in the midst of a whole sea of thoughts that we had. So we spend our lives sort of half here. I say half here because fundamentally we are here. We're here, and our fundamental consciousness never stops. It's like you can't shut it off. You're always aware of something, what they call the Six Knowables. These are objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, bodily sensations, and mental objects. They come and they go, and there's always this awareness of them. It's what we are, this awareness of these phenomena. It's like a space. They call it a space. The word in Sanskrit is dhatu, and we inhabit this space of awareness, and our awareness is one with that space. It is the space. And in that awareness, in that space, these phenomena, these Six Knowables, are arising and passing in the moment. One time there's visual objects are the most dominant. Second most dominant are sounds. And then after that, from time to time, physical sensations, when we become aware of our bottom, now that I mention it, sitting on the chair. Smells and tastes come and go. Not here right now, maybe, but will be when you start making, or maybe you just had dinner. And then mental events, which, of course, come and go all the time. So what this discipline is when we begin to appreciate that the return from dream is our escape from suffering, is the answer to the problem of suffering that we have wanted to deal with, this problem of unhappiness, which lives in dreams. It lives in the thoughts that we have. And so we begin to practice meditation, and we begin more or less to shift our loyalty from dream to this simple, clear awareness that is arising in the present moment all the time. And we are not just shifting our loyalty, it's more than that. We're beginning to realize that these dreams are dreams, fictions, that they're not true. And that what is true is this, which is always here in the present moment. And when we begin to live in this, it involves a whole different set of values. It involves a rejection or a leaving behind of the values of passion, aggression, stupidity, hunger, arrogance, jealousy, and overcoming of these kleshas, because as we come back into the present, they dissolve. There is also something else that happens, and that is that we begin to discover that the world is not quite what we thought it was. We consider our world to be the world of dream, as we see it through the filter of dreams. And these dreams tell us that the world has a past and a future and a present, the three times. But the more we come back into the present and let those dreams dissolve, the more we realize that the past and the future and even the present are fictions. They are mental creations. I mean, where's the past now? You can't see it. And if you think about the past, all you're thinking about is a teeny fraction, an interpretation of something that you experienced 5 minutes ago, 10 years ago, whatever it may be. It's not really the past. It's just another dream that you've created. Just like somebody writes a story for television. These dreams are just like that. They have no more reality than that. But just like stories for television, they are based on fragments of experience. And the dreams of the past are just that. They are fictions. The dreams of the future never comes. They're all projections, stories that we tell about what might happen. And how often does it happen, actually, as one imagines it's going to happen? Never. Because when the future arrives in the present, it's so full. This world, as we turn around like this, is just chock-a-block with the arising and passing away of the Six Knowables. But our dreams about the future are teeny-weeny, selective little stories. And even the present, we might say the present actually exists, but no. And if you try and find it, it's already evaporating. As you look at the present, it's gone. It's just another idea, an idea that is relative to the first two ideas of the past and the future. And so in the higher Buddhist teachings, they say that the three times are a myth. They don't actually exist at all. Excuse me, I've got to make this phone go away. And then what they talk about at the highest level of the teachings is what they call the fourth moment. It's not the past, it's not the future, it's not even the present. It's beyond time. And that's where, in fact, we live. We live in this space, which is actually beyond time. And the more that we practice our mindfulness and our awareness, the more we begin to discover this, and it draws us, it pulls us, because it's full of life, this space, this fourth moment. It's full of life, it's full of freedom, it's full of intelligence, and it's full of heart, a love of life, of the present moment. Discipline, then, is when we begin to get some taste for this. First, we get a taste for how unhappy we are with the way our lives are going, because we're lost in these unpleasant dreams, these very habitual, repetitive dreams. Each one of us has our own style of dreaming, our unique way of suffering based on past experience, which plants seeds in our minds that repeat over and over again. They come to fruition again and again and put us into patterns of behavior, unhappy patterns. And if they're happy, which they can be from time to time, they contain within them the seed of suffering because we're worried that we're going to lose them, which we will eventually. And so what begins to happen is that on the one hand, we begin to realize that we can deal with this problem of our unhappiness, our suffering, through meditation, through the act of mindfulness, coming back from dream, and awareness. Awareness is beginning to appreciate that fourth moment, which is reality. So on the one hand, we begin to realize that we can come back from suffering, and on the other hand, we begin to get drawn towards reality, sanity. We begin to get a taste for it. It pulls us the more we practice. And so what discipline is the constant act of identifying egotism, its manifestation, and of saying, I'm going to come back, and we come back to mindfulness and awareness. Really, it's a rejection. You see, the whole game of ego, of I and other, is a constant entertainment. It keeps I and other, the mind, occupied with this I other game. Someone we were talking here before the class started, a bunch of us, about how seductive and powerful the news is today. You know, COVID, politics, the economy, the Electoral College, Biden, Trump, the whole thing. And it's like this painful, pleasurable entertainment. That's what ego is all about. Ego is constantly looking for some way to keep itself going in a game. And if that game is painful, and it can be, it's still an entertainment. And if it's pleasurable, it's an entertainment. And so what discipline is, again and again, is the act of identifying that entertainment and saying, no, I'm not going to play that game anymore. I'm going to come back, or at least not for the moment, come back into awareness of the real, of this present moment. And when we practiced today together, and we worked with the breath, going out into space and dissolving, that practice is a hybrid of the two practices, mindfulness and awareness. As we come back from the dream and see the breath as it rises in the body, as you can feel it as it exits your nostrils, that pulls you out of the dream. That's the mindfulness. And then the breath goes out into space. We visualize it going out, and it's dissolving as it goes. And at the end of the out-breath, it has completely dissolved. And there's just this space. That's the awareness. The mindfulness is the breath going out, dissolving, and as it dissolves, we come completely aware of this space, the room, the time that we're in. This is the practice. And the discipline is to do that again and again, and the discipline is enabled by those two things. One is our desire to reject and get away from the unhappiness of our lives, the confusion, the suffering, the fear of death, the fear of loneliness, the fear of pain, all those things. And it's also enabled by the growing realization that this space that we are inhabiting, the reality, the fourth moment, if you will, is beautiful, free, inspiring, open, full of a funny kind of joy, pleasure. Let me look at these notes. He says, we're constantly looking for escapes from our anxiety through various forms of entertainment. And even religious practices, like especially in the Vajrayana, Tantra, where you get very complex practices, even religious practices can be used in a samsaric, that means a confused way. And that's illegal, he says. You can't do that. You're not supposed to. But lots of people do. Lots of people do. They get fascinated by these exotic practices having to do with channels and chakras and visualizations of deities, And I mean, I've got one behind me here. It's Tanka. That's Yamantaka. Probably can't see it at this distance. And you work with these visualizations, and it can be a path to sanity, but it can also be perverted and turned into another form of entertainment. And the only way to deal with this, the samsaric world of entertainment, of constant back and forth of ego, is through discipline. And the discipline is mindfulness and awareness. He says any religious practice other than the Hinayana practice, that's the beginning practice of straightforwardness, could be used as a form of entertainment. Discipline is about giving up the search for entertainment. That's a quote, including religious fascinations of any kind. And believe me, Tibetan Buddhism, especially Vajrayana Buddhism, attracts religious fascination. I mean, lots of people have done it. You become a professional tantric. So you start with shamatha practice, which is essential. You need to sit and meditate. Just do it. And then he talks about Sultram, Shila, and how it cools off the heat of the kleshas. The kleshas, you remember, are the defilements. They are the emotions, passion, aggression, jealousy, envy, pride, greed. And these are the kleshas. And they're painful. Painful, but they also are very entertaining. They involve us in entertainments of all kinds. We're going to get even with that so-and-so because they hurt me. I'm going to become rich, and I'm jealous of all these other rich people, but I'm going to become one of them. And then you set off on a project to storm the gates of heaven, and you become a jealous God. So they're very involving, very entertaining. But really, what Shila is, what Sultram is, what discipline is the act of coming back and cutting that. We cool off the heat of the kleshas. We cool off the heat of those passions. And he talks about the empty-heartedness of egolessness. Because egolessness, giving up that I other game, well, you're giving up a lot. Giving up a huge occupation, or occupations, plural. We have many of them. So once you begin to hear this message of egolessness, which is also the message of the fourth moment beyond time, then you begin to discipline yourself to come back from dreams, to wake up from dreams. And that's what the shamatha meditation, mindfulness meditation, is all about. There are three categories. And the first is that it is good, this discipline, because it allows us to be present. And you're present in three ways: physically, with your body; orally, with your speech, which means conceptually; and with your mind, which has to do with awareness. And so it's good, Shila, discipline in that way. It allows us to, because what it allows us to do is bring the body and the mind together. See, when we're lost in dreams, our body and mind are separate. You could be walking down the street, I always use this, heading towards Starbucks, and you're so lost in a dream you walk right by it. Or you're sitting there dreaming, worrying about something, and somebody calls your name and you don't even hear it because we're so lost in the dream. Our bodies and our minds are not in sync when we're lost in dreams. When we are aware, when we come back into this awareness of the present, not even the present, the fourth moment, here, now, awake. Body and mind are synchronized. They are one. They are the same. They come together. They're not separate as they are when we're dreaming. He says this, that having come back from dreams into the present moment, then we expand out automatically into awareness practice, into awareness of this present moment. Just as saying it over and over again in this chapter, I'm quoting him, to experience egolessness, you have to give up your various preoccupations. If you have a stronghold of any kind, like I'm going to be successful in my business, or I'm going to get even with that so-and-so, or I'm really hungry, I want to satisfy this hunger I've got, whatever it is, then you're haunted by that dream. And to experience the egolessness, freedom from that, you have to give up those things. He says this, it is about being awake. And then he's speaking for himself. I love this. I am haunted all the time by this, need to be awake. And if you decide to practice the Dharma, you should be haunted too, he says. That's a great quote. You should be haunted by the constant, remembering to come back from dream, to realize that you're dreaming and come back, to wake up. And there are three gates, which are body, speech, and mind. These are always called the three gates. And you discipline your body by going against its habitual tendencies. And the main way you do that is by sitting and meditating, either on a meditation cushion or in a chair. Doesn't matter too much. Speech, that's a good one. We blurt things all the time. He used to give what he called elocution lessons. It was horrible. We'd sit around, the rain in Spain falls mainly in the plain. And I had a good friend of mine called them electrocution lessons. But it's to make one more aware. We speak unconsciously so often. And to make us more aware of our speech. And of course, in mind, we come back, it's all about discipline, mindfulness, waking up, which produces a feeling of wholesomeness. I'm just going to read some quotes here. He says, without discipline, you are useless. You have not made a connection with yourself because you have not actually experienced your body, speech, and mind properly, personally. We've made a connection with dreams, and the dreams are not me. They are not I. They are not the real person, these dreams. They have been brought in from outside, learned, and they speak to us as though they are me, but they are not. This is modern psychology, especially psychoanalysis. They talk about the false sense of I. It's learned, and it speaks in terms of suffering, a need to be different. And so what we really need to do is to experience our body, our speech, and our minds properly. There are tremendous numbers of videos of Trungpa Rinpoche on YouTube. You can watch him. He looks like somebody who is constantly aware of every gesture and every word. At least it did to me. And then he says, talking about natural discipline. He says you could regard discipline as your personal adornment, as the glorification of your natural existence. It could become food for your being, food that you like to eat. This is a positive. The lineage holders of the past also went through this training and bound themselves to the teachings. These teachings of awakening. That is why you take the refuge vow, to bind yourself to this wholesome discipline, as past lineage holders did. So for those of you who took the refuge vow, that's a good reason for why you did it. And for those of you who are thinking about it at some point in the future, that's a good reason to do it. You're binding yourself to this discipline of awakening, of sanity, of commitment to coming back from neurosis into the world of awakening. Finally, he says, genuine commitment arises out of taking delight in practice. When practice is no hassle, you begin to feel openness and confidence. It is like children who have no hesitation opening a box when they know there is a toy inside. And that's the key, when they know that there is a toy inside. And that's what happens for us. We begin to get more and more of a taste for awakening, for sanity, for the fourth moment, from freedom, from this neurotic I-other game. And the more we begin to get a taste for that, the more we want to come back to it. And then genuine commitment arises because we are beginning to take delight in the practice. It involves, and then he says, this is an interesting one, natural hierarchy and common sense. Common sense is just knowing you got to pay the rent. Natural hierarchy is that we're constantly involved in hierarchies in our world. There are people who teach us, and we are the students. There are people who lead us, and we are the followers. We are the leaders, and other people are the followers. We are the teachers, and other people are the students. There are constant situations of these natural relationships, which he refers to as natural hierarchy. Finally, he says, Dharmic training is based on having a natural sense of what is good for you and what is not good for you. It is not based on following particular rules, but on fulfilling your natural potential to know what you should cultivate and what you should avoid. Discipline is not based on feeling guilty or trying to avoid painful situations and cultivate pleasurable ones. It is a natural process that binds together body, speech, and mind. Your entire state of being will be in harmony, which makes a wholesome human being. Just think about this final thing of how often in our daily life, mind and body are not synchronized. They're not together. Mind is one place, the body is another. It's about bringing it all together. And body, by the way, doesn't just mean this. It means everything, the physical quality of the world. So we can have a discussion. Anybody? Somebody raising a hand? Stephen. And
the title of the chapter, Gnawing Rock, is it?
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay, I'm a little closer. The title of the chapter is called Continually Gnawing Rock. And then in somewhere he says something along the lines of gnawing rock, even though there's an entire mountain to gnaw. That was just an analogy I didn't really understand.
You didn't understand?
I didn't understand.
Okay.
Can you elaborate on what he means there?
Well, in the beginning, you see, when we start to meditate, we're so used to finding forms of meditation, of entertainment. And really, when you start to meditate, you're giving up that entertainment. So the first thing you experience when you start to meditate is boredom. And there are two stages to boredom. The first one, which you experience right away, is hot boredom. And that boredom, it's like you're sitting there and you're thinking, gosh, what can I fantasize about to pass the time? Or how much longer do I have to sit here? And, I really like to get up and go and watch a television program or whatever it might be. And there's a feeling of heat in that boredom. But after a while, as you begin to become more adept or used to the practice of meditation, the boredom becomes a cool boredom, like a running stream is what the analogy, a stream that's going down over the rocks. It becomes a cool boredom. And then you begin to realize that you have the capacity to sit there like a rock and be peaceful in boredom. And then it becomes cool boredom. So Gnawing Rock, I think refers to the first one, the hot boredom, when we're sitting there and we're struggling to stay on our cushion or in our chair.
Thank you. That does help, actually.
Who else? Laura, could you identify people who want to speak? I've got my screen and speaker view.
Yeah, we don't have electric hands yet.
I have a question, and I feel like it's gonna. Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, Jenny, we're having a hard time hearing you.
There's something wrong with your sound. It's vibrating. Try again. Jenny? Speak.
Looks like she's making some adjustment.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we'll come back. Tully, were you putting your hand up? Or you're just adjusting your iPad? Okay. Judith, you need to unmute.
I was really struck by the I don't know, the similarity of this chapter as you described it to Neil Gabler's nonfiction book, Life the Movie. I think I've discussed that with you, John.
You have to bring it up again, and especially there are people here who need to be brought
Yeah.
in.
His hypothesis is that can I put it easily, that entertainment has devoured reality, and that we are all living our life as if it were a movie and we were the main character in it, rather than living life directly. He wrote this in the 90s, but Trump would be the perfect example of where things go when life is lived that way. It has to do with the culture of celebrity and how even the products you use, which are famous, confer a celebrity on you. So it's so similar. I imagine Gabler must be a Buddhist.
Or else these truths are just self-evident.
Yeah, yeah, but the similarity really was striking. And it destroys the whole idea of morality, of good and bad, which is anyway a duality. But it now is how much does what you have or what you are conform to what you see on the screens? If it conforms, you're fine. Everything's good. But if your life doesn't look like that, you're nobody, you're nothing. So it's fascinating the way those things tie in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting, the ideal of this Buddhist path is that you do become nobody. That I dissolves. And there's just this constant arising and interaction with this world as it arises in the moment. Beautifully.
Yes, but this kind of nobody is the pejorative nobody.
So Jenny's back. And then Brianna. Jenny, you want to give it another try?
Sure. And I feel like the question's going to sound like I'm being a pain in the ass, and I'm not trying to. How does we're always in the fourth, we're striving to be in the fourth moment as much as we can swing it. How does that sort of line up with, we study history, we study about the Buddha's teachings and, even some history of this lineage. How does that square? Like, how does looking back in that way and even getting those stories told, right, historically in oral tradition and written, how does that square with the fourth moment and our stories' dreams?
That's a great question. There are levels to the teachings. And the three main levels are called the lesser vehicle, the Hinayana, sometimes called the foundational vehicle, because lesser is sort of pejorative. The middle one is called the Mahayana, the greater vehicle. Maha means great, yana means vehicle, like a cart. And the ultimate is called the Vajrayana, which is the adamantine or indestructible vehicle. It's also called the Tantrayana and the Mantrayana, the vehicle of Tantra. Tantra means continuity. And mantra, of course, is, sounds. But really what Tantra means is the continuity of this constant awareness, never ends. And mantra is mind protection. In any event, there are these three levels. Trungpa Rinpoche was unique. He felt that he had great faith in the people who came to study with him, in their intelligence. And he really taught even the beginning teachings of the Hinayana from the point of view and within the style of the Vajrayana, the most advanced. So if you were to study in a more traditional environment, for instance, if you were to go to become a nun, join a Buddhist monastery, which some of my friends have done, you'll be given a set of rules of behavior. Monks and nuns, they have these rules that they adhere to. These rules of behavior are: don't take life. I mean, the five basic ones are: you don't kill, you don't steal, you don't lie, you don't drink intoxicating alcohol. No, you don't, you don't kill, steal, lie, have improper sexual relationships. And then the fifth one, if there are only five, this is for ordinary people, lay people, is you don't drink intoxicating alcohol, because if you do that, you're going to commit the other four. Okay. And in programs, sometimes we take those vows, but monks and nuns have a whole list, hundreds of rules. And these rules are to keep them safe from a very conventional point of view, safe from committing bad karma that's going to impede their progress on the path. But as their insight grows, then you begin to realize that that adherence to these rules can become another form of self-aggrandizement, of egotism, like you're trying to protect yourself, trying to be a good person, you know? And eventually, the person, as they progress, transcends or goes beyond the rules and starts working out of insight and open-heartedness and compassion, which is much more genuine and less self-serving than adhering to the rules. You see, this kind of progression is happening all the time. Trungpa Rinpoche really taught from the third level all the time. The idea of the fourth moment is a third level teaching. The idea of coming into pure awareness and seeing the value of your life is really at least a middle level teaching and not a beginning one. So we have to understand this is much more profound the way this is presented than you might get it if you were experiencing this in a more traditional venue. Does that answer it, or can you repeat it again?
I was trying to square any study of history or even recording of history with staying in the fourth moment. And where my mind went is, our stories dreams?
Well, we study history in the same way that we study the rules of behavior, because we want to optimize our lives in the present moment, right? That old, who was the Santayana, about the purpose, those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it, and other things like that. The idea is that if you study history, then you can create a good life in the present out of rules. But it's, it can lead us down some terrible paths. I was a student of history. That was my major in college and in graduate school. I studied Chinese history, and I focused in on the relationship between the United States and China. And that relationship is one of myth. It was dominated by the US, fear of communism, which led us into the Vietnam War. The fear of the domino theory that went throughout. History is a two-edged sword. It can lead us into terrible error. It can also help us understand our lives. But on the whole, it's a very limited story. It's another story. And I'll tell you, I regard history, after being a student of it in both undergraduate and graduate school, as fiction, as a very limited version of a story of what happened, supposedly, told by different people. And it changes from one person to the next, from one year to the next, from one age to the next, the version of what actually happened. Because people come at it with their biases. And we have to understand that. I'm not saying that it isn't useful, but we have to understand the bias of the particular historian and the bias of the age in which that historian lived and what they were speaking out of. History of the world, it varies from one age to the next with the values of that age. And the purpose of Buddhist history is to inspire us to tread the path. And it's a very, particular, and it's full of fiction, especially Buddhist history, all kinds of fictions.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add, I don't know, there's a way that history gives context to the present moment. There's a way in which history could live in the present moment. I'm just thinking about how when you listen to traditional Buddhist speeches, they often start with a history of the teaching, passed down from so and so and so. It's sort of like giving you, you know where this is coming from, right? You can sort of establish its lineage, and is this a fly-by-night operation? No, it's like, so I don't know if that's relevant or not.
I mean, consider, for instance, the history of race in the United States and how it's changed, from the time of the Civil War to now. It's phenomenal. It's just huge change in perspective and in meaning. Yeah. History is a lens that is very colored. Well, let's go on. Maybe some other people have some things to say
Brianna, do you still have a question?
or comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to share a metaphor that I learned from somebody else when they were talking about meditation, and kind of reminds me of the fourth level that you're speaking about. And it's imagining yourself when you're meditating sitting at the bottom of the sea, and all of your hustle and bustle, work, and all your worries and what's going on in the news and the world is above the sea, which has been helpful for me. It's just assuming that, you can breathe underwater, but you become, I think, a little bit more aware of yourself and your body. If you imagine when you go underwater, it changes your perception of things. And I found that helpful. And I feel that that's somewhat a little bit in the fourth area of awareness, mindfulness awareness.
Thank you.
Like there's a whole nother world, right? The sense of a whole nother world. Yeah. Mark has his hand up.
Hi, just a quick observation. I think it helps a little. When we're talking about history, even in situations where we have, like, for instance, some of these shootings where we've seen people get killed, and I don't want to get into the political aspects of this, but we see the video, and yet we all see something different, depending. And if you have a video and you can't agree, what is our history really? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly, yeah.
Judith.
I'm sorry. You're doing it, Laura.
Well, I think it's all contained in the word, his story, history.
Oh.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know how to pronounce Richie. Leanne, sorry.
Hi,
But
Leanne.
it brings me back to this part in the book that says that kind of change in logic evolves from neurotic tendencies at the level of what are called mental contents, or abhidharma. That is, the mind begins to change the message of reality by imposing its preconceptions on things. Right? That's what we're all moving around in our thoughts.
Thank you. I think that any version of the past is a fiction aimed at telling us a moral, a story about how to live in the present. And there are so many different historians with different morals and different messages. You know, at the same time, over the course of centuries and years, the history of things changes. Where people see the past, it's a fiction. They're creating. You know, I mean, where is the past? You know, you just select out little things. I mean, when you teach, for instance, when I studied Chinese history, it was all about the political movements and sort of natural catastrophes. And meanwhile, there are hundreds of millions of people who are living lives that aren't treated by these histories. You know, they're living lives like they're rice farmers, or they're, building carts or whatever they're doing. But historians are looking at a different kind of picture. And this is the same thing we do with our lives. We look back at our lives and we select out stories that are meaningful to us in terms of drama and how we're going to live our lives going forward, what we're going to do. And they can often be very painful, those stories, and very arbitrary. And what this is saying is, ultimately, what Buddhism is saying is that the only real is what we're experiencing now. And the rest of it, you can talk about it and use it, but you have to be aware that you're selecting out for a particular purpose.
Jane.
Yeah, hi. I had said earlier before meditation, I had to leave, that this was so far my favorite chapter in this book. And yeah, because there's a simplicity and there's an upbeat kind of hope for humanity. So it ends that natural discipline, this whole concept of this line, which I just love it, on page 152. Genuine commitment arises out of taking delight in practice.
Oh, beautiful.
No?
Yes.
Yes, and then he goes on, dharmic training, because when you were talking about history and truth and reality, I went back because I wanted to see in the early chapters, there's varying definitions of dharma as truth, and what the truth there is that it's pretty ordinary, which goes along with this idea of practice and commitment just being very pleasant. And he ends it with dharmic training is based on having a natural sense of what is good for you and what is not good for you. When your mind is together, your body and speech will also be together, which goes back to this whole idea of discipline. Your entire state of being will be in harmony, which makes a wholesome human being. So I find this chapter and these final words about natural discipline very human, very comforting, very, it really rings as truth to me. So I just needed to say that because I've always, remarked kind of very skeptically about a lot of stuff in here.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. That's terrific. Okay. Anybody else? If Jane's finished.
Mary.
Okay, hi. So I guess
Mary.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess, well, there's going to be like two things I want to say. I just love the part in the speech, the language of we shouldn't just burp out our language. And then there was another sentence that said, sometimes words are entirely the expression of the vomit of our state of mind. And I just laughed at that. I love that. But what I connected with is the idea of discipline is definitely a 24-hour-a-day job. And I guess for me, just studying this, my alaya, which in the previous chapter, that storehouse of our memories, I sometimes feel that, you know, when I'm not in my awareness moment and my mindfulness moment, I guess something I question is, you know, if I have a memory from my past, that's true. But I guess the question is, you know, why do I have that memory, and what is it bringing up for me, and why am I thinking it? And so I guess that idea of, you know, dreams are not true. Well, I guess, yeah, but some thoughts are true because they're memories that happened to me. But I guess what I think about is that habitual patterns of sometimes thinking about memories or experiences, both the positives and the negatives, and trying to, you know, bringing myself back to being in the present, which is a much more, as you say, sane place to be. So it's that taming of the mind and practicing the meditation. So I just, I guess I like this chapter too, but that the idea of it's a 24-hour-a-day job. Yeah, and sometimes it feels like that to try to get my mind.
Don't you find that when you have a memory,
Yeah,
it's colored? It's colored by feelings of positivity and negativity and hope and fear and good and bad and judgments.
yeah, but it doesn't mean it's not true, right? I mean, it's true,
Well,
right?
the fact that the event may have happened,
Yes,
but when you have that memory,
yes,
it's colored idiosyncratically by you. So if someone complimented you and you have this memory and you feel this feeling of pleasure at the memory, you know?
yeah,
And if someone insulted you and you feel this feeling of anger.
right.
So there's always that subjective.
Yes, and I understand that. It's bringing on that layers of dropping the storyline and the cliches and all that goes along with that. I agree, but I still question that it is still true.
Okay.
It's still true for me. It's, yeah, it's because it's a memory.
Okay. Thank you.
It seems to me like it's more about the, it may be true, whatever you mean by that, but it's the interpretation that's super subjective. And the further back the memory is, it seems like the interpretation can really get twisted.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But I still, it's that question of semantics of true versus interpretation, storyline, and yeah, the emotions that come up with it. Yeah.
Thank you, man. Anyone else?
Steve has his hand up.
Oh, good.
Hi. Yes, you talk about being in the moment of awareness, and that being there can bring on a great deal of joy and pleasure. And yet we talk about these emotions being kleshas that are poisons. So I'm a little confused. Seems to be a contradiction there between being aware and then that generating the very kleshas that we are trying to get away from.
Yeah. What they say on the path is that you experience a pleasure, a joy at overcoming suffering, you know, at escape from suffering. And that's seen as a positive value. But that in itself becomes another klesha, as you said, and it has to wear out. It's just that it's an easier one to wear out. And that on the path, as a person progresses more and more, there's a feeling of having escaped suffering. And that becomes another kind of ego game that has to wear out too. It's just subtler and subtler and subtler, all the way to enlightenment itself.
Right, right, good.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else want to talk? Because if not, then we should bring this to a close. Okay, wonderful, everybody. Thank you. And let's go, if we could just close with the dedication of merit. This is a very Buddhist thing to do, and it's giving up your ego by dedicating this to the benefit of others as well as oneself. By this merit, we all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. So remember, everybody, we're not having class next week, unfortunately, and see you the week after.
Merry Christmas to those who celebrate.
Yep, and
Thank you all so much.
all the rest.
Yep.
Happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays.
Happy
Yeah.
holidays.
Great to see everybody.
Good
Great
to see
seeing
you.
John.
Thank you all.
Mark,
Bye.
Judy,
Care, everyone. Bye-bye.
bye-bye.